So, what if the biggest battlefield wasn't some physical place, but inside your own head? Today, we're going to dive deep into the really unsettling world of neuroweapons and mind control. You know, that strange intersection where cutting-edge science meets absolute secrecy. Now listen to this. You can control 8 billion brains on the planet. I mean, wow. And that's not from some sci-fi movie. That's a direct quote from a Harvard-educated scientist, someone with a deep background in advanced defense research. The whole assertion is that with the right tech, you could potentially read and maybe even control every single human brain pattern out there.
So, what are we dealing with here? Is this just science fiction, or are we peeling back the curtain on some kind of secret reality? That's the big question, right? It really pushes the limits of what you think is possible. So let's break down the evidence, let's look at the claims piece by piece, and you can decide for yourself what you believe.
Okay, so first up, a voice inside the skull. We're going to start with probably the most personal and honestly the most disturbing claim of them all. This is the experience of hearing a voice that doesn't seem to be coming from the outside world at all, but from inside your own head. Just think about that for a second. A sound, or maybe even a voice, that you literally can't block out. It doesn't matter what you do, because it's not traveling through the air. It doesn't enter your ears. The theory here is that the brain itself is being told to perceive a sound, totally bypassing our ears and our most basic understanding of how we hear things. And, of course, this alleged phenomenon, it has a name. It's called voice-to-skull, or V2K for short. And this is a central piece of the puzzle in all these claims. The idea that sound can be, piped directly into someone's consciousness. You can't plug your ears to stop it. There's no escape. All right, Section 2, the science of sound weapons. How could this tech even be possible? Look, it is so easy to just dismiss all this as impossible, right? But there's an actual documented scientific principle that people who believe in this stuff point to as the mechanism. So let's get into the science and see how this could even work.
Okay, so this is called the microwave auditory effect. You might also hear it called the Frey effect, named after Alan H. Frey, who first wrote about it way back in 1961. Now, this is not some fringe theory, okay? This is a real, documented effect. It's where pulsed radio frequencies can make you hear a clicking or buzzing sound inside your head.
So how we hear things normally is pretty straightforward, right? Sound waves travel through the air, they go into your ear canal, and they vibrate your eardrum. Simple. But the Frey effect, that's a whole different ballgame. The microwaves actually pass through your skull. They cause a super tiny, super rapid heating of your brain tissue, which creates this little pressure wave that your inner ear picks up as sound. The key thing to get here is that your ears, your actual ears, are completely bypassed. Okay, on to our third section, connecting to Havana syndrome. So for decades, this Frey effect was just a scientific curiosity, right? A little known phenomenon. But then, reports started trickling in. They were coming from US diplomats and intelligence agents all over the world, and they were describing this bizarre, debilitating set of symptoms. And suddenly, this abstract theory got dragged into a very real and very public mystery. Which brings us to the big question. Is there any documented evidence of these kinds of effects? I mean, are there real cases? And the answer, well, when you look at the documented symptoms, it's yes. What came to be known as Havana syndrome was this whole cluster of neurological problems that doctors just could not explain. And these symptoms were absolutely concrete and totally life-altering. I mean, we're talking about persistent dizziness, serious balance problems, constant headaches, crippling brain fog. People couldn't concentrate. And in some cases, you could actually see abnormalities on their brain scans that looked like an injury, but there was no impact, nothing to cause it. These were sharp, highly trained people whose whole careers relied on their minds, and now they were struggling just to function.
Listen to this quote from the first CIA agent who came forward. "I heard these crickets in this sound, and my brain hasn't been the same since." That just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the struggle these victims faced. Not just the weird auditory thing that started it all, but the years of denial from their own government, with so many of them being told it was all in their heads. So now we get to Section 4, the mind as a battlefield. This is where it gets even creepier, because we're moving beyond just physical harm. The sources we've looked at suggest a much deeper, more insidious goal. The idea isn't just to injure someone, but to completely destabilize their mind and, just erode their entire sense of reality.
So the alleged process here is basically psychological warfare 101. It's actually been compared to military boot camp. Step 1, break down the individual.
You do that with sustained stress, maybe constant sounds or other sensory input. Then comes cognitive overload. The mind just gets overwhelmed and can't process what's real anymore. After that, you get ego breakdown. The person's entire sense of self starts to crumble, and once they're in that state, they become vulnerable, susceptible to outside influence.
And this all feeds right into that classic Cold War nightmare, the Manchurian Candidate. The idea isn't necessarily about some kind of instant zombie-like mind control. It's more subtle. It's about creating a person who can be, well, nudged to carry information, to perform certain actions, all without being fully aware that they're being influenced at all.
Okay, buckle up because now we're moving into the fifth section, the voice of God claim. This is the ultimate escalation. What if you could bypass suggestion entirely? What if you could go straight to a feeling of absolute, unquestionable command?
Well, that's the alleged voice of God weapon. The whole concept is that a message is delivered in such a way that the person on the receiving end perceives it as an undeniable external truth. Like a command from a deity or something. And think about it. When a belief feels that absolute, your ability to even think about resisting just melts away. And this threat, it doesn't just stop with one individual. Because powerful ideas, they spread, right? The sources we've been looking at call these mind viruses. Basically, beliefs and emotions that are engineered to be contagious. They spread through social networks, and pretty soon a shared idea hardens into a collective, unshakable truth for a whole group of people.
And this quote really drives home just how sophisticated this all allegedly is. It's the most complex weapon system we have put together ever as a species. So we're not talking about one single piece of technology here. It's supposed to be this complex web of directed energy, psychological ops, AI, and that V2K tech all working together. A system designed to make someone's reality completely synthetic and controllable.
Which brings us to our final section. Who decides what's real? Because after going through all the tech and all these claims, we're left with a really profound, really unsettling problem. And it's less about physics and more about, philosophy and what it means to be human.
At the end of the day, here's what's so important to remember. Behind all these theories, there are real people. People with documented neurological symptoms whose lives have been completely turned upside down. And they're often facing disbelief and skepticism from the very institutions that are supposed to protect them. The pain is real, the symptoms are real, but the proof, it's always just out of reach.
And that's really the question we want to leave you with. In a world of invisible influence, where something you can't see can disrupt a life without leaving a shred of clear evidence, who gets to decide what's real? When belief itself becomes a weapon, who gets to pull the trigger?